So I'll assume by now you've heard the news. Andrew Luck is no longer an NFL quarterback. He's now a former NFL quarterback. Hangs him up. 7 years, all of them in the NFL with the Indianapolis Colts. He was a great football player. When healthy for Indy, the last few years he's dealt with the injuries, the assortment, from the nagging to debilitating, including 2017 shoulder surgery that had him out for the entire campaign. It took a complex physical rehabilitation process to get him up and running to being a blue chipper again in 2018, which he was last year. Rightfully so, won the NFL's Comeback Player of the Year, more than 4,000 yards passing, more than 30 touchdown passes, got the Colts back to the playoffs since the last time he led them there in 2014. He was a Pro Bowler. Looked great. In fact, I thought he'd have the Colts primed and ready for a run at Magic this year and maybe a great chance to win his first ever Super Bowl ring, but not meant to be. Number 12 hangs him up. Was I surprised? Yes. However, it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time, that a player of his caliber hangs him up and retires early. So with that said, I'm going to give you 5 other football players in the modern era in my lifetime that are famous for early retirements. Here's my top 5. By the way, I'm Matt Levine. Thank you for joining me. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. And go ahead, check out 954sports.com. If you feel inclined to do so, give me a like on this report, please. Again, thanks. Anyway, let's start with the most surprising from 1st to 5th. Number 1, he was number 20. Retired in 1999 out of the blue. Instead of being an active participant that summer at the Lions training camp, Barry Sanders boarded a plane to London after floating a fax to his hometown paper in Topeka with a press release announcing he retired after 10 seasons with the Detroit Lions in the National Football League. 10 outstanding seasons, each of them a Pro Bowler. He was on the precipice of rewriting the record books, had 1,500 yards or so to go to surpass the great Walter Payton as the NFL's all-time leading rusher. When he retired, he did so with 15,269 yards rushing, good for a 5.0 yards per carry. Right on the dot. A half a yard every time. A half first down, every time that guy touched the football. And anytime he touched the football, a home run could be hit, as you see there. One of the all-time greats indeed. How good was he? He only had a minimum of 1,100 yards or less in one season. And that was because in 93 he was injured and only played 11 games. His last season, he rushed for over 1,400 yards. The season before that, in 97, next to last, only time in his career he surpassed 2,000 yards rushing in a season. 99 career touchdowns. Sanders walked away 30 years young. Not particularly due to injury. I'm sure he had his assortment of bumps and bruises, but nothing ever major. But I think football loved Barry Sanders more than Barry Sanders loved football. I also think he was frustrated by all the losses mounting in Detroit. Only one great season in his 10 with the Lions that they performed well enough to be a contender. In 91, 12-4, won the division, won the divisional playoff game. The only playoff win still for the Lions in the modern era in NFL history. They would get smashed in the NFC Championship game in 91 by the eventual Super Bowl champion Redskins. That's the closest Barry Sanders ever came to contention for a Super Bowl. So he left you wondering what else he could have done. I certainly think he would have rushed for over 20,000 yards if he stuck around. Interesting side note, too, is that there were talks when he retired. The Lions wanted to recoup some money from his big-time contract because he retired unexpectedly young before the contract expired. And his agent had told the Lions, if you release Barry and let him play for another team, we'll pay you back the money. Lions said, forget it. Never played for another team, never played for the Lions again, never took another snap in the NFL. The second guy on the list, another Lion. Played post-Barry Sanders era in Motown. They called him Megatron, a freakish athlete who could do it all as a wide receiver. One of my all-time favorites, Calvin Johnson. Megatron stood at just about 6'5", 240 pounds, ran the 40 in 4.35. This was a guy, if you're a fantasy geek, and you're like me, you've been doing it for a while, that you'd look at the game time status right to kickoff because he was always listed as questionable, with an assortment, a variety of injuries. But this guy showed up and would always be prepared to play. Amazingly enough, he only missed 9 games in 9 seasons. Holds all kinds of records in the franchise for the Lions. NFL ones too, like the most receiving yards in the season. 2012, I remember clearly passing him in the draft and regretting it because he went on to have a record-setting 1,964 yards, broke Jerry Rice's record, retired at 30. 3 years, I should say, after retirement, always rumors floating that Megatron would come back. Never happened. Keeps you wondering, though, what if he would have played just a little longer? What else would he have accomplished? Tiki Barber, a guy who, as a New York Giants fan, thinks that there's 2 Tikis. There's the Tiki on the field, the Tiki off the field. Tiki on the field, don't want to really talk about him. There's the Tiki shtick, who I think a lot of people got fed up with. Left football abruptly after the 2006 season to become a broadcaster. Thought he can go from a Pro Bowl football player to an all-pro broadcaster. Found out it's not as easy as he thought it would be. Left prematurely. The season after he leaves, the Giants win the Super Bowl. Tiki never got his ring. Will go down as one of the all-time Giant greats with more than 10,000 yards rushing. In his last 6 seasons, rushed for over 7,600 yards, the second most. The guy who was the leader in that span from 2002 to 2006, LaDainian Tomlinson. And we all know that LT is in Canton with his gold jacket. Tiki, an outstanding football player, left way too early at 31 years old. Number 4 on the list, another running back, left football at the age of 28, at the top of his game, as the Vikings' all-time leading rusher. That's before Adrian Peterson showed up. At the time, in 2000, Robert Smith, with more than 6,800 yards, was the Vikes' leading rusher. That season was his breakout season. More than 1,500 yards. He was on the verge of becoming a free agent and breaking the bank. But he left football for good. An early retirement that had a lot of us puzzled. Years later, he would say he dealt with alcoholism in his career. He's now sober. He did leave football saying he wanted to study medicine and had other interests. And this is one of those guys that when you say this, you truly mean it. He's a gentleman and a scholar as much as he was a great football player. Over the years, he's done some great broadcasting. Always enjoyed him on the television, hearing him on radio, in the booth, in studio. And I can see why. It seems like he needed to leave football for all the right reasons. More power to Robert Smith. And finally, I'd be remorse not to throw in a good old-fashioned defensive player. And here you have it with a linebacker for the ages, Patrick Willis, a San Francisco 49er, their first-round pick in 2007, played 8 seasons in the National Football League, 7 a Pro Bowler, Canton-worthy seasons. Great one. How do you know he's great? Listen to this statistic. If you're a defensive player and you played 8 seasons and you recorded 950 tackles, you're a gamer. To go along with 20.5 sacks, 16 forced fumbles, But he retired after being maligned in his final season, only able to play 6 games because of a toe injury that had nagged him throughout his career, became serious enough he needed major surgery. After playing just 6 games, he had enough and said no mas. So there you have it. 5 of the most surprising players, I think, next to Andrew Luck, who announced early retirements from the National Football League. And now Andrew Luck, he's on that list as one of those guys who will always make you wonder what could have, should have, may have been.